Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got Todd Evans back to the channel. Hello, Todd. How you going?
Hi, very good. Thank you. Doing well.
Good to hear. We are going to talk about Blondie. So we've never spoken about Blondie on this channel, and I think it's probably timely that we do have a little bit of a chat. What we are going to do is talk about our favorite Blondie album. So, what I might do just to start proceedings is, Todd, put up your CD of the album you'll be talking about, and I will do the same. Oh, there you go. We are going to talk about Eat to the
That's
Beat.
great because I feel like nobody talks to this about this album enough. So,
Look, 11 albums, Blondie is still active, so many classic songs. Todd, they've probably been more known as a singles band, but I think what gets ignored in the smoke and mirrors is that they put out some mighty fine albums. And I'm glad that we're highlighting this album because, in my humble opinion, straight off the bat, I think this is definitely one of their best. So, what we might do is we'll just talk about our first impressions of this album in the day, go back in time to 1979, and then we'll just take it in turns and spotlight songs. And look, it doesn't matter if we cross over and we pick the same songs. So,
yeah, sounds
what was
good.
your impression of this album in the day?
Well, this was the first new Blondie album I ever bought, like with my own money, because when I started listening to them, Parallel Lines was already out.
Yep.
And so I had heard Parallel Lines, I had heard Plastic Letters, and the first Blondie album, there was a local radio station that used to have a new wave and punk show when I was in like the ninth and 10th grade, and they would play the Giant Ants from the first Blondie album, but that used to be a difficult album to find. So I was familiar with the second and third album. So when I bought this, I wish I still had my original vinyl. I don't, but I bought vinyl like with my allowance money and 79, so I wasn't working yet. And so I was totally I was in. I mean, I just thought that this was absolutely a worthy successor to Parallel Lines. And I feel like this is really Blondie got so much into genre jumping, which I think was something that Chris Stein really liked to do. I saw him mention on one of the social media outlets a couple of years ago where he was showing either a sketch of the lyrics or a tape that was a demo of Heart of Glass, and it was from like 1975 or 1976 or something like that. So he was on board really early with trying to do a whole bunch of different kinds of music. But I feel like Eat to the Beat is really the last time you hear Blondie as a new wave sort of punk band because they diversify so much after that this is really I kind of feel like Plastic Letters, Parallel Lines, Eat to the Beat is kind of like their trilogy of Blondie, how they were when they became famous.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I agree with you. Look, as a young lad, smitten, I probably had a boy crush on Deborah Harry, like a lot of lads did. She's
I can
incredibly.
remember I think I've said this before on a Contrarian show, but I can remember being on the bus on the way to school when somebody telling me that Debbie Harry she's 33. She's so old. Wow, I can't believe she's 33. We thought she was like 20 or something like that. And it's funny now. Well, to think about that is we
Yeah,
thought she was,
absolutely. I
how
mean,
could she
she
be
was
that
a
old?
Playboy bunny. She was part of the Hugh Hefner stable. And read
Right.
her book, read her biography. It's a harrowing read. It's basically the almost the history of New York rock music in the 70s. It's such
Hmm.
a great book. But yeah, look, I was smitten. There was a show on TV in a Stray called Countdown, and they played all the hits, and I fell in love. I thought she was just an absolute goddess. And to be quite frank, I still think so to this very day. I do play
I do
Blondie a
too.
lot, but it was probably, Todd, it was probably later in my music collecting, listening career that I started to pick up the albums. I think in the early part, it was very much buying singles, listening to the greatest hits. It's only when I, started to get into their discography and go, wow, there's a lot more. The deep cuts, there's a lot of diversity, as you said, and a lot of genre hopping. Yeah, look, I love this album. So what we'll do, I'll just quickly, just a couple of admin things about how the album went. So this went platinum in America. It went to number 17. So it didn't do as well as Parallel Lines, which is their biggest selling album off the back of Heart of Glass, I would imagine. But it hit UK number 1 and Australia number 9. So UK was a very strong supporter of Blondie, maybe arguably a little bit more than America. So that's something that we can pick up as we go along the show. But there were a number of singles off this album, Dreaming, Atomic, Union City. So there's quite a few songs, Todd, in this album that are like live staples, or if you went to a greatest hits of Blondie, they're there. So I'll throw it to you, Todd. Spotlight a song and let's get into it.
Well, the first song on this album that I've always liked Dreaming, and I may talk about that more later, but the first song that really got to me was The Hardest Part, which is a song that nobody ever talks about. And one of the reasons that I love it so much is because it sounds so good. It's one of those recordings that I always go back to. Like if I get a new piece of stereo gear, I always want to play that because I just love the way it sounds. And it's more mainstream rock than a lot of the songs that they do. Jimmy Destry's playing organ, and it's an interesting song lyrically. Apparently it's about an armored car robbery, but it doesn't really go into detail. It's just kind of words that, kind of are related to something like that. And a lot of their songs are like that. A lot of their songs lyrically don't have a lot of depth, but by design, so that, you can kind of use your imagination. But I just absolutely love The Hardest Part. I think it's a great hook. I think the guitars sound great. And I just absolutely love, Dreaming starts off the album with Clem Burke sounding like Clem Burke, with his kind of fast tom fills and stuff. And The Hardest Part sounds more like a mainstream rock track, which I think is cool. It just shows that there's a lot of diversity in the album.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just do a counterpoint to The Hardest Part. I think it's like a sped up Rolling Stone song. There's a bit of a groove, but it's kind of sped up. If you slowed it down,
Yeah.
it'd be something that you probably would hear on Emotional Rescue or Some Girls.
Mhm.
And there is an underlying Stones groove to some of these tracks, but that's one that hit me when just hearing it. It's sort of like a bit more sped up. It's definitely in the pocket. And I like that bubbling synth line because, like, Deborah Harry was so far into the Studio 54 scene. I can imagine that the band just, let's go to the 54 and just listening and absorbing of all, that was playing in that era, because there's disco, there's funk, there's R&B. They're sort of like a petri dish of everything that was in New York at that particular time.
Right.
And
Right.
I love that. I wrote down Georgie Moroder, maybe not quite Georgie Moroder, but there's this little bubbly synth line all the way through, and it adds a lot of flavor to that song and makes it quite compelling.
It's something that Jimmy Destry does a lot, and it's early sequencer, I'm sure, and I think that kind of makes. I've always kind of felt like Jimmy Destry is kind of their secret weapon, and he makes a lot of songs. He takes them to that next level of interesting by putting that kind of stuff on it. And I'm going to talk more about Atomic later, but that's another example of a song that has something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll go to Dreaming. I think this is one of their greatest songs of all time. It's you got that beautiful surf rock drumming of Clem Burke. I was interested to find that they wrote this as a counterpoint to ABBA Dancing Queen. I'd never quite got that, but I can understand why. Now listening to it a few times, I think it's a very positive, uplifting song, and I love the lyrical content. Dreaming is free, so it's a very celebratory cracker of an opener. It kind of bursts out of the speakers, and that's what you need on an album. Very Euro pop. So there's a lot of Europop melody lines, and that probably fall into the sort of wheelhouse of ABBA. I think it's like Chris Stein and Deborah Harry wrote this song. I just think it's just one of their best songs. It went to number 2 in the UK charts. Didn't chart as well in the US, but maybe the US in 1979 weren't really ready for Europop, because Europop wasn't that huge in America comparative to sort of Britain and other parts of the world, was it, Todd?
No, no, I don't think so. I've always been surprised at the chart, how Dreaming did on the chart in the US. I expected a lot more out of it, and I think the band did too. And I think Mike Chapman has said that when he had doubts going into it whether or not they could do something as popular as Parallel Lines was, but he thought, well, when we started the sessions, I heard Dreaming and I thought that was a hit, so I felt better about it. And so I've always thought that, but I think it's one of the, if I had to make a list of top 10 album openers, that would be one of them.
Oh, absolutely. And it's firmly in the genre power pop. So
Yeah.
1979 was probably, if you had a look at a graph, that was probably the peak of power pop. You had the Knack, a lot of other bands that was starting to get radio airplay, but it was just fleeting. It wasn't a genre that lasted long and then went back into the underground. But for a moment, it was right at the kind of at the top of the charts. And Mike Chapman, I've got a lot of Mike Chapman. This is his best work. It is sparkles, Todd. It absolutely sparkles. And I think I read a lot of interviews. He said that the sessions laid down for this album were chaotic. A lot of people were getting into a lot of drugs, but he said this is one of my most proudest achievements, considering the chaos that was happening in the studio. And I have to agree. I just think that it just sparkles, this album.
Yeah, and there's some stuff in the liner notes of the remastered version of this album where Mike Chapman goes into the fact that he was kind of a taskmaster, and it's really funny because when he's talking about Parallel Lines, he talks about how the band didn't have a lot of discipline in the studio prior to that, which I think is interesting because he makes it sound like prior to that they were just a disorganized mess, and that's not what I hear on Plastic Letters. But he was a taskmaster, and he talks about how uh, uh, Debbie Harry would leave the sessions and like go, to a different part of the building and cry because she was so stressed out. But because he was trying to get her to pay attention to her phrasing, to pay attention to her intonation, and all those kinds of things, and it was hard for her, but I think it was so important because you see her get just so much better. She started out great, but she gets so much better on these two albums, on Parallel Lines and Eat to the Beat. By the time you get to Union City Blue and Shayla, she sounds like a really exceptional vocalist. Like,
Absolutely. It's like she's just morphed into something like a goddess. Um, Her vocal lines are just sublime.
yeah.
And I don't think they've ever been any better than this. So I think you've really
Yeah.
hit the nail,
And,
Todd.
and I don't
Those
mean
two
to like
albums.
say Chapman is the reason that happened, but I'm sure he's part of it. I don't want to take, the credit away from Deborah, but
Well, Todd, like Bob Daisley, an Australian legend, and you're probably unknown in our very own country. He's just one of the legends of rock, and should be celebrated more. Seriously, Mike Chapman. You just look at his discography, folks.
yeah.
It's huge. Anyway, what's your next pick?
Well, I know that people will. It seems to be that the conventional wisdom on this album is that people tend to think that Union City Blue is the best song, and I actually am. I don't want to completely skip. It's not the one I'm going to talk about next, but I don't want to completely skip over it because I don't want there to be people thinking, how could they talk? How could two different people pick their favorite songs in this album and not one of them pick Union City Blue? I don't know if you're going to pick it or not, but that's kind of a song that they did. They did quite a few of the songs that were sort of nostalgic, kind of girl group things, almost a Phil Spector kind of treatment. And they did a lot of songs like that. And when I was younger, those were my least favorite songs because I liked the ones that sounded like new wave more or disco. So I don't want to just skip over Union City Blue because I think it's a really gorgeous vocal delivery on Debbie Harry's part. And so I love that one. But what I want to talk about, because I had a little battle in my mind about which of these two I was going to do, but I want to talk about Shayla because I think Shayla is absolutely beautiful. I think it has that little opening, that quiet little opening is so great. The drums kick in and the drums are sort of distant. They sound like they're back. If you have headphones on, they sound like they're back in the mix. And I just think that the lyrics and the her vocal delivery are just absolutely beautiful, even more beautiful than Union City Blue. It's one of those things where the chorus is just, her singing a note basically without any words in it. And I just love the song. And so I was trying to decide which of those two I was going to do, and I had to pick Shayla over Union City Blue, but I love them both.
Yeah, look, there's not really a dud track on this album, so I'm
No.
glad you're covering that. I'll counterpoint it and do Union City Blues. So I love the lyrical sentiment about this. It's like her reflections that I'm in New York, and it's the negatives and the positives of, a Jersey girl making it. It kind of reminds me of that. Have you ever seen the movie? You've probably seen the movie Saturday Night Fever with John
Yeah,
Travolta. Do you remember where he's in Jersey and he's looking at the skyline and imagining what the big smoke's like? This song kind of replicates that.
yeah,
She's like a
it does
Jersey
have that
girl
feeling for sure.
and looking at the skyline and just being entranced by the whole aura of New York City. Because this is a New York City album, isn't it? If Todd, if we were going to pick top 10 New York City albums that encapsulate the music, the sounds, the smells, this would have to be one of them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be definitely for me. Yeah.
And an interesting point, you know how you were saying about Mike Chapman saying that he couldn't believe how undisciplined they were. Isn't it funny? This band came from the CBGBs, and I've seen a lot of early footage, and they were kind of a bit of rough, bit raw.
Hmm.
But so many bands that came from that scene and turned out to create all these polished masterpieces, like Talking
Hmm.
Heads, for an
Yeah.
example.
Well,
So,
yeah, Talking Heads is crazy because when they start, I mean, they started so much longer before they made an album. When did they start? 1975, something like
yeah,
that. But they just kind of picked up instruments. A couple of
yeah,
people in that band really couldn't even play. They just started playing when they
yeah.
started the band.
Absolutely. And, basically it's all about figuring it out over albums.
Mhm.
And by the time they figured it out, it was just magnificent. But I love Union City Blues. It's like a Torch song. I love her vocal lines. It just absolutely soars. So, we're like inside one, and it's just so strong.
Right, right.
All right, over to you.
Well, I want to talk about Accidents Never Happen, which I think is the end of side one, if I'm remembering my vinyl correctly. I really love this song because it starts out with the little drumstick click, the kind of skiffle thing that Clem Burke is doing, and it's really new wavy. I like the lyric "Accidents never happen in a perfect world," and that's always been one of my favorites. I think that it kind of saves the end of side one because I'm not crazy about E to the beat. So I mean, I don't think there are any weak tracks, but if I had to pick one, that's probably the one. So I think "Accidents Never Happen" just kind of comes along like a little whirlwind and just kind of saves the side and ends it in a really great kind of high energy kind of way.
Yeah. I think Eat to the Beat is a little bit of a throwback to their early punk days, CBGB.
I'm
So,
glad it's there. I mean,
yeah,
it kind of is
I
a bridge back there.
yeah, I think it's like their footnote or a footprint, just saying this is where we came from, and we still have the edge. We're not totally pop. I'm going to put a focus. I'm going to jump to side two, slow motion. I love that soul revival. It's like Northern Soul meets Motown. It just got a beautiful groove. I mean, it's a 60s throwback, but Deborah does it so wonderful, and it's just such a joy to listen to. So I think I actually would have started off side two with that song, just a little bit of a just slight adjustment. But what do you think of Slow Motion?
Oh, I absolutely love it, and it's funny. It's an example of I mean, in 1979 was split between the ninth and the 10th grade for me. And so, like, I learned about that kind of music. I learned about that kind of 60s soul kind of thing from this. I mean, this is what I heard first, you know? So it's like I heard Union City Blue before I heard Ronnie Spector, you know? So it's like that to me was my education. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'm glad you talked about slow motion because I hadn't planned to talk about it. But yeah, it's perfect for
Oh,
what
I
it
love it.
is. I
And
mean,
isn't it funny? A lot of her contemporaries love that sort of Phil Spector 60s sort of music. I know I'm going from Motown, but I'm now going to girl groups. But the Ramones, like Joey, loved that sort of Phil Spector sort of sound. So there's a lot of that throwback into the girl groups, the soul, the Motown of the early 60s. So not only it's contemporary and it's absorbing of what's in the streets and the music of New York 1979, but it's also a throwback to the heritage of pop music and rock music, like late 50s, early 60s.
yeah, and the people, I mean, these guys were, I mean, it's only 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago when that stuff was happening. So to them, that's what they listened to when they were kids. So
Yeah,
people are always
and
surprised, like when bands like Genesis say that they were influenced by Motown, and it's just like, well, actually, that makes perfect sense when you do the timeline and you go, okay, well, yeah, they would have been kids. So,
yeah, and that's what's playing on the radio in some way, shape, or form. Even though it sounds like it's like 5 degrees of separation between that sort of music and
right,
Motown, but that's what they would be influenced with, because that was
yeah,
all that was playing on the radio.
yeah.
All right, what's your next one that you'd like to focus?
My next one is actually Die Young, Stay Pretty. There are so many things that I love about this song. I tend to not, I like it more now, but when I was younger, I didn't like things necessarily that were like reggae influenced or had that kind of groove. I mean, I liked them, but they weren't my favorites. And I think probably back in 1979, 1980, that Die Young, Stay Pretty was probably not one of my favorites. But this song in headphones, it has such an incredibly wide soundstage. I mean, there's stuff happening everywhere, and everything you can hear every instrument almost isolated. It's such a good recording, and the sentiment of it. It's one of those things that it's like when you're young, that's a really funny. You think that's humorous, die young so that you don't get old, and people will remember you as being, attractive. But I mean, it's not so funny now that we're older. But back then, that whole idea and that lyric, "Die young, stay pretty, deteriorate in your own time," I just think is hilarious.
There's kind of a lot of dark humor in the lyrics, isn't there? Like I think you were saying that the lyrics are simple, but I think it's like a Trojan horse. There's a lot of really sharp lyrics in
There's
Blondie.
yeah, one of my favorite lyrics of all time, not from this album, but from Parallel Lines, is picture this, a sky full of thunder, picture this, your telephone number. That has stuck with me for decades. I just think it's brilliant. I mean, I just think it's absolutely brilliant. And Blondie has a lot of stuff like that, where it's just like a couple of lines really stand out as being really just exceptional.
Look, they're an exceptional band, and I mean, when you look at it, the band. I mean, there's Deborah. They just look cool.
They do.
So you've got a singer
They
that's
look cool, and each one of them looks different from each other.
yeah. I love the packaging on this album. I think this is one of my favorite new
This is
wave.
one of my favorite design design the whole thing about it, the way it's done with the fonts and the grid. It's one of my favorites of all time. I absolutely love it. The inner sleeve and
Yeah.
the outer sleeve. And I was into photography when it came out, so I used to make contact sheets just like that inside sleeve. And so yeah, I just think everything about it is appropriate. The logo is just out of this world. I mean,
Yep. Yep.
by far the best one that they've ever had, and they've had a lot of good ones. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Can I quickly just mention how Deborah was such an influence to subsequent female rock performers? Like, I just wrote down some names. I put Go-Go's, Bangles, Madonna, Transvision Vamp, to the
oh
UK
yeah,
folk, Saint Ian, so many. PJ Harvey.
yeah,
uh, you know, she is kind of a groundbreaker. I think, everything sort of, all the cards fell in the right place. The band looks good, the band looks cool, and they write great songs, and they've got a great producer. It's just like the perfect package. It's
yeah.
like all the planets align. But however, you look at the chart placings in America, I was actually scratching my head that none of, some of these albums didn't reach number one. Do you think they were a sort of a band that appealed to both sides of the coast, but the Midwest, they didn't really, sell to them?
Yeah, I have thought about that a lot. You know, it's funny. They're kind of a band that and in a way in the States the Pretenders are kind of the same way. They have a lot of things that people think are hits now, but they weren't really hits. You know what I mean? It's like my wife and I listened to this station on Sirius XM called First Wave. And I know you guys probably have that too, and it's global, but there's probably like 12 Blondie songs that they play. They kind of rotate through, and it's like they play Atomic, and they play Dreaming, and they play Union City Blue, and they play One Way or Another, and Sunday Girl, and Fade Away and Radiate. And it's just like some of those songs weren't singles at all, but I think people look back on them nostalgically and think, oh, Blondie has lots of hits. But chart wise, they don't really have a lot of hits. They should have had a lot of hits.
They were one of those bands that appealed to, probably the California, the New York, but just the
Hmm.
Midwest, which is probably kind of more of a rock crowd. They didn't really gravitate to that sort of
Well, it
audience.
makes me wonder though. That's a really good point because it makes me wonder if bands that got huge, even if it was just for a short time, like the Knack, maybe they managed to appeal to the middle as well as New York and LA. But things like Joe Jackson were just kind of on the
Yeah,
coasts, and things like
yeah,
Blondie too.
yeah. That's not to say you can't have a career. If you make it big in New York and you make it big in LA and nowhere else, you can still have a decent career, sell out venues, sell a lot of records, and use that as a stepping stone to the rest of the world. But yeah, I guess the Midwest is the key, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, the Knack, I think that did 2 mil, which is in the scheme of things, I mean, not too bad because they were like, top of the world, but only for a lightning in a bottle type of
right.
moment in time. And it was kind of all over in 6 months. That's like a real test case for the highs and lows within 6 months. It's like, oh, it's all over.
But yeah, and I think that's kind of how, I mean, this is kind of a separate topic, but it's kind of how I think artists' careers are built on what happened to the Knack not happening to them, because that's actually what you don't want. Because if you think about artists that had a hungry period and a slow rise, somebody like Joe Jackson, I think, is a good example, and a slow rise, and then managed to make, have successes with music that is from vastly different genres, and then still be respected and still get, people in seats in their 60s and even 70s in some cases. And so Blondie is kind of that big kind of band. I mean, that's why they're still touring now, is that
Yeah,
they
yeah,
didn't have this moment of, oh my God, they're the most popular thing in the world. And
yep,
then, what happens after that?
absolutely. Well, there was a fall. Hunter was a complete flop. And then you had the
Hmm.
Deborah Harry solo album Coco, which was an absolute disaster. It didn't help with the album cover. Um,
No.
but I was going to ask you the question. So, a couple of singles that were really big in Australia, were they big in America? Rapture. Now, that was one of the first
That
songs
one was pretty big
that had a rap line. That
in the
was one of the
States.
first mainstream songs that had a rap. Was that big in America?
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was pretty big. I think, if I'm not mistaken, and this is definitely something that I should have researched ahead of time, but
yeah,
I think The Tide is High was number one,
right.
and Rapture was almost
Yeah.
uh, as successful. And it's funny because that's another thing that I was reading this week that when they turned in Auto American, the record company was not very excited about it, and they said we don't hear a hit. And then Jimmy Destry said, like years later, like, well, it had two of them. But I think if I would worked for Chrysalis at the time and I heard Auto American, I might have said the same thing. I like that album, but it's so high concept. And that's where you start getting to the point where it's just like, okay, if I want to hear Blondie sounding like what I think Blondie should sound like, they're only doing it a couple of times here. And everything else is, I mean, Auto American has, I know we're getting off topic, but Auto American has like cocktail jazz on it and just, I love that. I love that kind of experimentation, but at the same time, it really took them away from what they were. And by the time you get to the Hunter, I mean, Jimmy Destry's keyboard approach is completely different. It's almost like a techno kind of a thing, rather than the subtle thing that he used to do. And I mean, I guess that's probably a natural transition, and when you're going through and all the changes that are happening in the 80s. But the production on the Hunter is just, it's got that big drum sound that doesn't sound like them. It's just it's got a terrible cover. So I think that they were just there was just, I mean, first of all, one of the things that's cool about Blondie, but it was actually had something to do with their downfall, was uh there's a lot of them. There are six of them. And that ended up being an issue. And I read that they split into three camps. It was like Debbie and Chris, and then Jimmy and Clem, and then Frank and Nigel. And Frank was the first one to really kind of get booted out. And so I think that maybe that was cool that they had so many people, but maybe for the long haul, maybe wasn't such a great thing.
And then there was that Schmozzle protest at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Yep. Which I think is I don't want to take sides on that, but I think it's unfortunate that that happened, because I think it could have been they had a very the, Blondie in the 90s and 2000s had a very strict idea of what Blondie was. And when No Exit came out, there were four of them, and then Jimmy Gestry left to get clean, to get sober, and then he just wasn't invited back. He just thought he would do that and come back, and he was successful in doing that, and he just wasn't invited. And I think that's unfortunate. I don't want to I don't want to lay blame or choose sides because I don't know a lot about it, but I always thought that they probably should have. Mike Chapman says Frank Infante is one of the easiest musicians he's ever worked with, as far as just coming in and playing his part and doing it right and not having a lot of takes and being disciplined and stuff like that. So I feel bad when that happens to people, but I
Yeah.
understand that it does. And they had so many things pulling on them. They had so many people in their lives, and they were dealing with the drugs and all of that kind of stuff. And there were so many managers and people, trying to get him, the record company putting pressure on them. And so it's just one of those things, I guess, that you can't really do much about it. But I think it was unfortunate that I couldn't keep all of those guys together with them that whole time.
Well, I think this album is where there's the chemistry.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
All right, what's your next song?
Well, I have to talk about Atomic, because one of the things that make this album, I think, so cool is that it actually sort of, in a way, follows the structure of Parallel Lines. I mean, it has Atomic, which, in my opinion, at the time, and I think I still think this, which is, the disco song, and it is midway through side two, just like Heart of Glass was. And I think this is probably the last time that they could have gotten away with doing something like that because I mean, and in a way, you could almost say that Auto American is the same thing by having Rapture kind of in the same place. It's also in the middle of side two. But I love Atomic. If I had to put him in a battle of the songs, I think Atomic would win over Heart of Glass. I love them both, but I think Atomic is just a little bit better melodically. I think it's got a little bit more going for it. And it's just Jimmy Destry is so good on it. It's so cool. It's got the little sequence things and the part towards the end. It kind of builds and almost sounds kind of proggy towards the end. And I just love it. I think it should have been a way bigger hit than it was.
Yeah, what was the chart placing of Atomic, Todd?
It was on the Billboard Hot 100. It was number 39, so just
Wow.
barely top 40.
Yeah,
UK number one. So
go figure that out.
yeah,
Um, Look, I think it's probably one of the best songs on the album, and it is definitely top tier Blondie. I just think Harry just absolutely soars on this album, this particular song with her vocals, just this ethereal vocal. I love the bass line between Harrison and Burke. If the bottom end are in the pocket, I would love to hear an isolated bass and drums of this
me
particular
too.
song and hearing the boom ba boom ba you know.
Yep.
Euro Melodies, Giorgio
Hmm.
Moroder. I wrote that. It's basically encapsulates all the sounds that they were hearing in the clubs, Studio 54, and you're right, they got away with it. And to me,
Yeah.
I actually prefer this than Heart of Glass. I think
Yeah, I
Heart
do
of
too. If
Glass,
I
I
had to pick,
like it, but it's a
yeah,
bit
me too.
too overtly disco. But this one is
Hmm.
more epic. It's more widescreen.
Hmm.
It's sort of like it's a song that sounds important. It's got that grandiose sort of feel to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things I've always thought was really interesting about Blondie is when Giorgio Moroder produced for them, they did Call Me, but he didn't strip that down to just being electronic beats. It was still Blondie. It still had like real
Mm,
drums on it and stuff like that. And I always thought that was really cool that that he didn't change them into something different.
yeah,
He still kept them as Blondie, which I think
yeah.
is great.
I'm a Morodo fan. Are you a Morodo fan? I love his
I am.
work,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
especially some of those soundtracks he did, like Midnight Express, and
Mhm.
yeah, just it just added so much to the movies that he was scoring. Just that pulsating electronic feel to it.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of movies in the 70s and prior were just sort of string arrangements, but he was one of the first that brought that sort of the electronic. I think Tangerine Dream were doing it between him and Tangerine
Yeah.
Dream. They're probably some of my favorite soundtracks of all time.
Yeah. I agree.
All right.
Yep.
What other song would you like, if any, to
Let's see. What
focus?
have I done? Let's see. One, two, three, four. I I like we've already talked about slow motion. I like when this came out, I loved Victor. I thought it was great. It sort of grates on my nerves now a little bit. I kind of feel like if I had to pick something about this album that if I had to pick something negative to say about it, I would say that towards the end of it, it sort of dies a little bit. Uh, Sound Asleep and Victor in Living in the Real World. I like all those songs, but I feel like it sort of takes a little tumble. But Living in the Real World, I like a lot. I think it I like it better than the two songs that come before it. I like it a lot better than Victor, and I think that it pulls them a little bit back into the parallel lines direction for the end of the
Yep.
album. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's always been a highlight for me.
Yeah. I like that song too. I was going to focus on that because it's the closing track on the album, and it's just encapsulates power pop. There's a lot of
Hmm. Yeah.
urgency. Um, I mean, the band's just playing so tight. It's not sloppy. They are a tight ship.
No.
So whatever Chapman was doing, like the general, it was
Right.
certainly working in the studio. So
Yeah.
look, I think this is their most accomplished album, and I've heard them all. So, well, while I've got you on this, I always love putting you on the spot, Todd. What's your second album, second favorite? For me, it's probably Parallel Lines.
It is for me too. When I was younger, I liked Plastic Letters a lot, and there was probably a
Mm,
time that I would have said that that was my favorite. Like if you'd have caught me in 1978 or 79. But I kind of feel like Plastic Letters has some songs that don't quite work, and so when you put them together when you put it together with these two, I have to say that this is my second favorite.
yeah, absolutely. And another great album cover.
And if
Um,
yeah, and if somebody had said you're wrong, Parallel Lines is the best Blondie album, I would be like, yeah, yeah, you may be right. I wouldn't argue.
so Blondie in the 2000s got back together and they had a little bit of a revival in the UK with Maria, which is a
Mhm.
really nice song. And I think it went to the top of the UK charts. Did that get
It
any
did pretty
airplay in
well
America?
here. It did pretty well here.
Did you hear it on the radio in America?
No, not anymore. No, I have not heard it in a very long
But
time.
in the day, did
But
they play it? Did it
but
get
it
any
it, it
publicity?
charted.
Yeah.
Let's see. It was in the US. Oh, let's see. Oh, okay. This is interesting. In the UK, it was a number one. In the US, it was number 82, which is news to me because I remember in 1999 when that album came out, when No Exit came out, I was really excited about it. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time, so they were playing Maria a lot.
Hmm.
But yeah, that surprises me. I thought
Yeah.
it did
Well, I
better.
think the UK have always been very staunch supporters, and I mean they did a
Oh.
stint at Glastonbury. So
Yeah, and this is interesting too, a little side bit about the charts. There's something called the US Adult Top 40. It was number 14 on that.
the adult top 40. What does that
Yeah.
mean? So anybody above 40 got their own
They used to call that
charts.
adult contemporary.
All right.
So
Yep,
that
I've
would
heard
be
that.
like where somebody like Michael Bolton would do better on that chart or Mariah
Yeah.
Carey than they would on the Hot 100. And so that's
Yeah.
kind
Yeah. Mind-boggling.
I guess we were
Anyway.
all getting older.
Anyway, so well, anyway, Blondie are coming out in April, and our friend to the Contrarians and to the channel, Andy Blackwater, is plays the guitar. So I'm looking forward to seeing Blondie, and
Yeah.
I think
I'm
I've
really
seen
hoping
some.
they come down my way
Oh
later in
yeah,
the year.
they're still great live. Really, really good
Mhm.
crack band. So looking forward
When
to
was the
that.
last time you've seen them?
Oh gee, a long time. I can remember
I
seeing Deborah Harry, but it's been a long time since I've seen Blondie.
I have to admit something. I have never seen them.
Right.
I
Okay.
I was supposed to go see them during the tour for the Hunter. They played in Atlanta, Georgia at Six Flags Over Georgia, an amusement park. And for some reason, I couldn't go. I don't remember what it was. I think I couldn't get off work in time to get there in time or something like that. But I remember being really disappointed and because I thought, I may not get a chance to see him again. And that tour was not very well attended. It was they played to a lot of half empty rooms and they ended up canceling the European tour that was supposed to come after it. So
Hmm.
and Frank
Yeah.
Infante was already gone. He had already been replaced by somebody else. So
Yep.
that would have been my chance to see him. And I've had some chances in the last 20 years or so, but it just never happened for me. So I really
Yeah.
want to see them.
Yeah. Oh well. I'm sure that they will do a tour of America, but I'm
I
really
think
looking
so.
forward to seeing
Me too.
them because they've still got it. The songs are timeless. That's you're halfway there. If you've got the songs, they're well crafted songs. You know, you're there. So
Well, I think there's a time we were talking about this earlier, but I think there was a time in at least American music history where anytime a band was fronted by a female, they automatically got compared to Blondie. They're kind
yeah,
of the quintessential, you know, female fronted band in as far as the contemporary times, I think.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Todd, as always, a pleasure to have you on the channel and talk about Blondie. I just can't believe we haven't spoken about this
Oh, I
earlier.
know.
It's just one of those classic albums. So you can see Todd on a range of channels, but a lot on the Contrarians. Just type in the
Yeah.
word Todd Evans and you'll get the range of shows. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Click the bell. Tell us what you think your favorite Blondie album or Blondie song is. We love reading your comments. But one thing's for sure, you'll see me and Todd doing another retro or rock review in 2024. More to come. All right, cheers.
Looking forward to it.